Welcome everyone to our Campaign for Equal Dignity series of programs. I'm Jill Savitt, the CEO and President of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. Today's program is going to focus on Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Countries around the world have used this formal process to restore peace and deliver justice after their societies experienced mass atrocities such as massacres, torture, forced disappearances, enslavement, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. There have been some 50 truth and reconciliation processes worldwide since the 1970s. Some have different names than Truth and Reconciliation Commissions, and the most well-known, perhaps, was the process in South Africa to address apartheid that was led by Bishop Desmond Tutu. The idea of Truth and Reconciliation Commissions is that only by telling the truth about a country's past and providing victims with an opportunity to have the harm and suffering to them acknowledged and documented, this is the only way that there can be a different future. That's the truth part, an honest and clear-eyed assessment of what happened with a focus on participation by victims themselves. The reconciliation part is what you do next, and this can take many forms. Reconciliation is supposed to lead to healing and moving forward in a different way. Reconciliation can include holding perpetrators accountable. It can be reparations to victims, individually or through investment in communities harmed, and a variety of other ways to reconcile. Today, we are going to talk about what a national truth and reconciliation process could mean for the United States, a formal, structured way to address the long history of injustice that began with the forced removal and mass killing of Indigenous people and the kidnapping and enslavement of Africans and their descendants. We often hear, leave the past in the past, because remembering is painful. But we will discuss with our panelists today why dealing with the legacy of our past human rights violations is a necessary step to move forward in a new way. I think we can all agree that our country has come to a moment of reckoning on the history of injustice in the United States, and we need a way forward. Our panelists today have special expertise on these questions. All comments of the moderators and of the guests on our program represent the thoughts of each individual and do not represent the official position of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights. That's actually not true for the moderator in this case, as I do represent the official opinion. Dr. Gail Christopher is the visionary architect of truth, racial healing, and transformation at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. This project is a comprehensive national and community-based process to address the historic and contemporary effects of racism in the United States to bring about transformational and sustainable change. Dr. Christopher is also an advisor to U.S. Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California. The Congresswoman was slated to join us today, but we learned last night that she is unable to make it, and we are delighted to have one of her staffers, Shelley Mark, who will join us later in the program. We're joined today by Esther Ann, who played a driving role in creating a truth and reconciliation process in Maine. The Maine-Wabanaki State Child Welfare Truth and Reconciliation Commission investigated the devastating impact of Maine's child welfare practices on Native American communities. In brief, as part of longstanding official policy, government agents systematically removed Native American children from their families and placed them with white families. Esther is a board member of Maine-Wabanaki Reach. And we are delighted to have Nelson and Joyce Johnson, longtime community activists, co-executive directors of the Beloved Community Center in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the catalyst behind the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the first truth commission in the United States. That commission dealt with acts of deadly Klan violence during an event in November of 1979. We will learn more about that in just a minute. So let's get started. I'm going to start with the Johnsons. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you're all here with us. I'm going to start with the Johnsons. The Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission was the first of its kind. Can you tell us a bit about the events of November 3rd, 1979 that prompted your work and why you chose a Truth Commission model?
Yes, thank you for the question. We are historically community and labor organizers. And from the mid-60s, through 79, that is the work that we did together. Built the Grassroots Association of Poor People before poor people became a term, before Dr. King's Poor People campaign. And it was the most powerful grassroots group, we think, in the history of our city. We then grew to the point of believing that while the problem was deeply connected to the history of racism, and that being anchored by a poor slice of the American white population, not solely, but that's who carried it. We started to organize in textile mills and bringing together Black and white textile workers with the historical Black community, the home of the first sit-in movement in the nation, and all of that legacy. In the process of doing that, the Klan opened up a campaign against the work we were doing. So we were having a conference on overcoming racism and building unity among Black and white workers and the historical Black community. That's the context. As we were preparing for that, unbeknown to us, a Klan and Nazi caravan, by the way, we had gotten a permit and had worked out arrangements with the police to be there. We had never heard of the Klan and Nazi forming something called the United Racist Front. And they drove 50 or 60 miles from different places in the state, congregated in Greensboro, drove into the march, shot 5 people, killed 5 people, wounded 10 others. The police were nowhere to be found. We know that the police were tracking them. They had an agent inside of the Klan and Nazis, and the BATF had Bernard Bukovich, who was a BATF agent in there and who ordered the Nazis in Winston-Salem to come and bring their guns. He was pretending to be a Nazi. So all of that culminated in what is now known as the Greensboro Massacre. But when that happened, you couldn't find a shred of truth that this whole thing was then translated into, we provoked the Klan because we had had the demonstration before. We called them names. They got mad and drove into town and killed people. First of all, it makes a mockery of free speech. It's not free if you gotta die for it. Truth was just almost impossible to come by. There's an eerie feeling between the level of polarization in our nation today and what we experience. I was once in jail under twice the bond of Klan and Nazis, charged with murder. And they charged me with saying a curse word in front of the courthouse, by the way, which is not against the law, because I was accusing the police of what they did. And I got locked up. And so that's the way it went. We were targets, and all white juries did not convict the Klan or the Nazis of any crime. They were charged with murder. This all white jury set them free, and they were charged with violation of civil rights. Another all white jury set them free. So we had to find a way to forge a level of community truth. And frankly, a good portion of the Black community was beginning to get persuaded by the avalanche of falsehood that descended upon our community. So being Black is not an automatic road to understanding the historical truths that led to this. So that's a quick background of why we felt that there had to be some process to develop a community truth, that not just half of the community, but the whole community would come to some better understanding of collectively, what is it that happened that caused this? What actually happened on that day? How do we understand those juries? And what is it that we should do about it? That was what motivated us to reach out to truth processes. And we're thankful that South Africa sent truth commissioners here to guide us. Bishop Tutu himself came on 2 occasions. And I can say, jumping to the end of the process, we, the Beloved Community Center, hosted the first meeting of international truth processes, first and only one ever held in the United States, from 7 nations. And actually, it barely got covered in the local newspaper, and it was unheard of in the national newspaper. So all of that is to talk about the capacity of a polarized culture dominated by white supremacist thinking, whether they call themselves white supremacists or not, to shut down the truth and put up a falsehood that actually substitutes for the truth. So that's a quick background to why we felt it important to develop some process of building community understanding and community truth, and hopefully community reconciliation.
Very helpful, and we'll come back. We're going to go around to everybody, and we'll come back about the outcomes of that, but it is really eerie to hear you say what you're saying. It sounds like we're in a same song, different verse moment, and with the power of the internet to spread falsehoods makes it a more dangerous time. But the civil unrest you experienced feels very pressing right now in our world today. So very eerie. I want to go to Esther Ann and ask, so you also have an experience with the Truth and Reconciliation process. You use the term restoration instead of reconciliation in yours. Can you talk about the context in which you were a driving force of setting up this process in Maine?
Yes. First, I'd like to extend once again our gratitude to Nelson and Joyce. When we first were thinking about this process, we had the opportunity and the honor to meet Nelson and Joyce. I think it was in Detroit, and he gave us the best advice that has carried us through this whole process and continues to carry us to this day. And he said to stay strong as a group. Don't get pulled apart or pulled away from your vision, because it's really easy, because this work is so hard to do. So to clarify, we did call it a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Maine-Wabanaki Reach, the organization that created this commission process and still continues the work of not only implementing the commission's recommendations, but carrying on the work of truth, healing, and change here in Maine in Wabanaki communities. We have since changed the R in Reach. It used to be reconciliation, and we've since changed it to restoration, because we've learned a lot of lessons about that word reconciliation. And those of you that have seen the film Dawnland, which was made by the Upstander Project, they also did a film about Rwanda, actually, about the genocide in Rwanda. They, when we were making the film, and we called it the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So you'll see in that film, those of you that have seen it, a little bit of this dynamic around this word reconciliation, and all of the feelings about truth, healing, and change are shown in that film. It's real easy to get seduced by reconciliation. Let's just, it feels good, right? It doesn't feel good to be in conflict with one another. The truth is so ugly and horrible, it doesn't feel good to recognize it. And I was struck by the introduction when you were saying Truth and Reconciliation Commissions talk about what happened and what continues to happen. And not only what happened and what continues to happen, but who benefits from what is happening. And it's clear to see, the folks that benefit from it are the ones that kind of want to skip over the truth and get to the change, or get to the solution, right? And the folks who have been harmed oftentimes it's the first time they've ever had anybody ask them or pay attention to what their truth is or believe them. So they need more time. And as we've talked about misinformation, when history has the purpose of history or twistery has been to erase the existence of a people, we need to spend more time on the truth. So that was a conflict we saw through our process. And what Nelson was talking about, stay strong as a group. I can't, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that we've talked about those words that you have said to us. So remember what Nelson said, because it gets so difficult. It's the way we internalize the oppression as Native people, right? One of the ways we do that is we take care of white people. Right? We take care of non-natives, but really take care of white people. Yeah, don't be mean to them. If you say that, if you call them white people, you're being racist. So it's real, it's real easy to get seduced by this promise of reconciliation. And it's also easy to get sidetracked by the money, because you need money to do this work. And foundations really, I think, have a great responsibility to groups that are embarking on this work, because to help them recognize that they know what they're doing. They know what they need. They know what they need to do. Most of the times they need resources to do it. And in our experience, it's real easy to get sidetracked by what funders want you to do. And if funders are wooed by this that are seduced by this notion of reconciliation, they may be moving you to do things that is away from your vision, which Nelson says, stay true to your vision. So, and funders they're solution based, right? They want results, they want solutions, they want outcomes, right? They want reports, they want pictures, they want, so it's, that relationship there's a lot that can be done just in that with truth and restoration. So we changed our name to Restoration because it's more in line with our values. The goals of the Truth Commission process was truth, healing, and change, and that's still the goal of the work of Wabanaki Reach. Restoration talks of, it acknowledges harms that were committed, and it works to repair that harm. So one more thing I want to say about reconciliation. My colleague Penthea Burns just said that she heard from somebody else, so I don't even know who to credit with this, but they talked about reconciliation in the terms of, like a checkbook. It's not things going back together, it's what is owed, right? And what's left and what's spent. It's like to loss and gain. It's like, so there's harm, so there has to be reparations. I don't know if you even asked me a question, Jill, but
that was a really good context setter. To move on to Dr. Christopher. So there is Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, after the murder of George Floyd, introduced a resolution to create a national commission on truth, racial healing, and transformation. And you're advising that process, and you've been advisor to cities that have tried to take this on, like our other guests today. So it's hard locally. In this environment that we're in, what are the goals of setting up a national truth and racial healing and transformation process? And how hopeful do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for the invitation to be part of this esteemed panel and to be with people who have the courage to be on the ground in community doing this work. I need to step back just a little bit, and talk about how when I joined the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, their board of directors at the time, led by Joe Stewart, had made a board level commitment to become the most effective, in quotes, anti-racist organization they could be. And it was about that time that they hired me, and I came because of that, right? And I said to them, well, it's one thing to focus on what you're against, anti-racism, but what are you for? You know, and that's when we crystallized that we were going to promote racial equity and racial healing.
Dr.
So,
Christopher, we're getting a note that people can't hear you.
uh-oh.
And every word you're saying is precious. So
Okay, is this better? If I don't move, if I just talk right into the microphone?
I think it is better. I'll look in the chat and I'll give you a signal if
Okay.
they can't.
All
But
right.
thank you. Sorry to
Okay,
interrupt.
I'll try. You know, I usually am talking on my feet, so I got this inborn movement thing, but I'll try to be as still as I can and keep it working. I apologize. So at any rate, the Kellogg Foundation invested over a 5-year period in what we called America Healing. And America Healing, we funded many, many groups around the country, including the other panelists, to support what they were doing. And we learned lessons from that. And that led us to create in 2016, to bring all these communities together and create Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. We studied the different truth and reconciliation efforts at the time, over 47, I think. And we interviewed and we listened, and we wanted to design an approach for America that would learn from the lessons of other countries, which is why we didn't say truth and reconciliation. You know, there's a lot with that, right? We wanted to be clear that we wanted the truth to be told and documented and archived. We wanted to create the opportunities for real healing, and I'll define what we mean by healing. But perhaps most importantly, we wanted communities to be engaged in transforming our country into a country that no longer would perpetuate the fallacy of a hierarchy of human value, a country that would value all people equally, as is espoused in our founding documents. So truth, racial healing, and transformation is happening now as a process in at least 14 places around the country, cities, states, and towns. About 40 college campuses have set up centers for this, and we have organizations embracing it. We have a pretty straightforward framework for approaching it, which begins with, we call it narrative change, but that's really the truth telling. That's changing the story of America and the local communities and capturing what has been missing, right? And then we talk about the racial healing. This is very important because we don't want it to be a dichotomy. We want it to be all of us healing from this harm that we have perpetuated for centuries. And then we ask ourselves, so how have we maintained the fallacy for 4 centuries? What do we need to change so that it doesn't go forward? And so the other 3 parts of the framework are separation. Separation is a major tool of maintaining the hierarchy, and we can talk more about the many ways that shows up. But our legal system, as we all know, is also a tool for maintaining this fallacy of a hierarchy of human value. And then ultimately our economy. When we talk about who benefits, you know, we've designed an economy that benefits from the exploitation of people of color. So that's the framework that can be adapted to local communities, to organizations, to churches and religions. You know, they can all use that to figure out our way forward. So the short answer to your question is I am very hopeful. And when Congresswoman Barbara Lee, really 3 years ago, made the call to say she wanted truth and reconciliation at a national level for this country, she was introduced to me, and we've been working together with several others, quietly developing this approach. And it happens that she actually dropped the resolution after the George Floyd and the horrible disparities of the pandemic. But this work has been in process now, informed by, inspired by, and honored to be connected with the types of grassroots efforts that your panelists have shared, as well as the global efforts. Now, are you muted?
I was.
Okay, all right.
It's the new mantra of our lives. Are you on mute? I'm sorry I was muted.
I hope that sound was okay as I went on.
That was good. And you did some work and we fixed it on our end. So if you're more comfortable sitting back now, I think people are very excited that they heard every word. Want
All
to
right,
welcome
thank you.
Shelley Mark, who works for Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Thank you, Shelley, for joining us. We're just,
Thank you.
we've
Thank you
done
so much for having me.
we've done a round robin with folks, but I'll bring you into the conversation. How do we support this resolution? Where is it in the process of becoming a reality? How do people, if they want to get engaged in this, especially reaching out to their members? We have a lot of Atlanta people on this call, but from around the country. What's a way people can engage in this?
Right. So first off, thank you so much for having me on this call today. I work really closely on this resolution for our office and just all of the truth, racial healing, and transformation work. And I'm so happy to see Dr. Gail Christopher here. Hi, Dr. Christopher,
Hi,
who has just been phenomenal and instrumental in us writing the resolution, drafting the current bill right now, and just everything with our coalition. I would say definitely we've been working really closely, a little bit about truth, racial healing in the US, Congress 100. As Dr. Christopher mentioned, we started this journey about 3 years ago, just seeing like a lot of the work that has been done internationally. We know that there are over 40 countries across the world that have already started truth work, and that there's definitely a need here in the US. We know that we have some deeply rooted systemic issues and systems that exist here, and they're not a coincidence. Everything from our healthcare system to our mass incarceration to the economic and public health care crisis that we've seen that has been exposed even more through COVID-19, Congresswoman Lee just knew that it was time now for us to really move this. And everything ended up working out. We were pushed back by COVID-19, but we're able to drop the bill in June with over 120 original co-sponsors. And I will tell you this, and Dr. Gail Christopher can also be a witness to this. At first, we didn't really have a lot of people interested in the topic. And I think we're in an interesting time in American history and in our culture where there's this opening, and we really should move bills like Congress 100 and also HR 40, which is Sheila Jackson Lee's bill on reparations. And our coalitions are working closely together to build as many co-sponsors as we can. We have over 160 co-sponsors now, and that has been through the work of our coalition in calling members. We've had Truth Weeks of Action where people have hosted call-in days. They've emailed these staffers individually. We have constituents who are working in key states such as Florida and North Carolina. We have a target list that we're working with. I know that you probably heard of the news of what happened in California with reparations. And now I'm just like, even more, there's no reason why we shouldn't have every California member supporting Congress 100. So we're super excited about all of the movement that's taking place. And for those folks in Atlanta, we have a lot of Georgia members that we would love to get on top of this. And if people can call their local member and let them know the importance of something like this. And as Dr. Christopher stated, breaking down that idea of a hierarchy on human life is something that we really need to tackle. And it needs to happen through the federal government, because as we can tell from HR 40 and just from history, these things were issued by the government. So we need to break them down in that way as well.
Thank you, Shelley. I want to talk about the voices of people who have suffered the harm and the engagement of those directly impacted. And I'll start with the Johnsons. It's so important to have those who were targets of the violence participate, but that comes at some cost to them to relive the trauma, to relive the experience. What was it like for the people who were directly, the families, the survivors, the families of the victims who were murdered? What was it like for them to participate in this process in Greensboro?
Well, Jill, I want to add first my voice of thanks to the Center for convening us and for broadcasting this broadly, because I do strongly feel that versions of these truths and reconciliation, restoration, transformation, and certainly reparations are part of the path toward a future of what we call a beloved community. But to answer your specific question, The impact varied. For all of us, ultimately, it was a freeing, as Esther talked about. It was the first time we could speak our truth. We had, for those who don't know, we had a series of 3 public hearings convened by this independent Truth and Reconciliation Commission that was convened here in Greensboro, where over 500 people came to each one of those gatherings. It was recorded. There's still videos available. I can recall for myself, I remember basically, though I'd written the statement, I actually wept through most of it. And I was embarrassed about that, but then I found out later on that, as one of our former mayors told me, Mayor Carolyn Allen, that it was her first time of being able to shed the tears. And she said it was like a public weeping, much as the mothers have over the years wept for us all. And really our strength came from that weeping, because there had just been so much pent up emotion of bearing the lies, the burdens of being our children being told when they were 7 and 8 and they were there that day, that their father had caused these people to be killed, as opposed to the system of oppression through the Klan and Nazis, who were the trigger pullers, but they really were bearing out this system we have of a hierarchy of human value. And so for some of us, it was emotional, but for me, it really was a freeing experience. For others, it was, it brought the shame out more, because the truth was out there and some people had not known that individuals were involved with this. So it really varied. But our city, and when I say city, the larger, those in power still sought to shut down this truth. But the thing is, we did have then the recordings of what had been said. We had a strengthening of those who had been active freedom fighters in our community for years, since we were children ourselves. It really did strengthen us to carry on the fight, because as Alex Borain and the Archbishop Tutu told us, this truth would provide a foundation for us to move forward, and it in fact has. And then we've been able to speak with people like Esther, friends in Mississippi, friends in Detroit, friends all around the country who are also grappling with this. And we were just privileged to be a part of the assembly of folks that Dr. Christopher brought together under the Kellogg Foundation, still really continues to work with all of us long distance. So it varied, but it really was painful.
Could I just say a quick word here? The specific people became targets of the media, targets of the agents of public opinion, and we were demonized to the extent got up and left, because they felt that wherever we went, we brought violence. Wow. I had a dear friend who ran a restaurant, and we met there. We either had to meet in the park or you know, where the police were there with all of their video equipment, or this restaurant. He came to me one day and said, Nelson, I knew his father, I worked together. I was a student leader, vice president of the A&T student government. He said, I hate to tell you this, but y'all can't meet here anymore because the insurance company said that they're going to cancel my insurance. And we were having dinner, paying for it, but we were isolated. The widows spent, 3 of them, spent 30 days in jail, and they lost their husbands because they refused to participate in a fraudulent court process. I did 20 days for the same reason. So I'm saying that we became targets and pariahs, and I never would have believed that the city that I was a little bit of a hero in could do what it did. I didn't believe that. I now see the nation eerily similar to that. in terms of the degree of polarization. And let me argue this point. We refuse to let the white supremacists chase us out of the dictionary. The issue was truth. And without truth, none of it works. Community truth. And truth is the basis for healing. Truth is the basis for justice. Truth is the basis for transformation. So in some sense, we made that the target. And there were people in our coalition who said we should drop the quest for truth and just do reconciliation. And so we were, why are we reconciling? What are you talking about? This is nonsense. You know, what are you against? Truth or community or reconciliation? They just wanted to talk about a kind of Rodney King, let us get along. That has nothing to do with reconciliation, in our opinion. If it's not rooted in the depth of truth, it's just another fraudulent front. And everything else becomes that if it's not rooted in the depth of truth. Right. So that's been our, and we're working with 5 or 6 groups around the country, connected to San Francisco and Philadelphia and Boston. And that's the point we drive at. Truth has to anchor this, or the rest of it is so much noise and so much white supremacy acting nice.
Yeah. So Esther, this has to resonate with you because so there's a great documentary called Dawnland that looks at the process that Esther was a part of. And in the film, I remember you at some point say we have to kind of separate these two processes, truth and restoration or reconciliation, that having the victims tell their story had to be a sacred part of this. And you were running up to some difficulty. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I wanted to just comment on what Nelson and Joyce said first. When people want to just go to the reconciliation, I think it has a lot to do with fear. They're afraid of the pain of the truth, right? And they're also afraid of accountability, not only in the form of reparations to repair the harm, but accountability to their own self, their own spirit, their own soul, right? Their own heart, because it's really hard to to realize that what you thought you worked for your whole life, you just got because somebody had a policy of genocide against the people there, or a policy of slavery and racism against the other people. So reparations is, in our case, that is when we got the most pushback, was because people were afraid of reparations, of having to be accountable and having to repair the harm. So in that, what happened, it was the first visit. We were getting ready for the Truth Commission's first visit into a tribal community, and we were trying out what we had seen, not only what happened in Greensboro, but with the Canadian Truth and Reconciliation Commission. There were these public kind of opportunities for people to share their story. And so it was, in each of the tribal communities, before the commission came in, they were invited there, and there were people in the community that dictated the process, how they would come into the community and what it would look like, so that folks were in charge. So it was the first visit, and it happened to be my community, Zibayig, Passamaquoddy community. So it was really difficult, and we didn't know what we did know what we were doing, but nobody had done this before. So everybody was over prepared. The Truth Commission had a lot of statement gatherers prepared to gather folks' statements. We didn't know what it was going to look like. So I can't even remember. I mean, it was such a long, there's so much parts to the story, but I'll get to that moment in Dawnland where had dinner after the first day. So the day before that scene, we had another dinner, and I realized, I'm looking around and I see, mostly non-Native people, and they were all so excited, and they were all checking in, and one of them said, I'm just so excited to be with Indians. And I was like, big red flag. I was like, oh no, and I had to say something, which has been a struggle of my whole life. You know, trying to keep quiet has been really hard for me. I usually end up saying something. So I spoke up and I said, you know, I'm really concerned. You know, I don't want everybody coming there. So we agreed the first day those folks would stay behind in Eastport at the house, and we would call them when we got the lay of the land, how many tribal people showed up. So we called them in for lunch because there were a couple people that said they wanted to give a statement. And then we did the public statement gathering, and that's what you see in the film with my sister-in-law Denise sharing her story, and I'm next to her supporting her. And it turned out, no, that's not what the community wanted. It didn't work. It was horrible for her, and it was really traumatic for all the people that were listening. And the non-native statement gatherers were having a hard time, and you know that we take care of them. That, you know, in counseling it's called transference and all that stuff, but when you're in that situation and you're a Native person, you're going to take care of those people because that's how we're socialized. So there was a decision, wasn't even mine, but it was a group decision between the Truth Commission, the TRC, and folks from REACH and people from Zibayag, that we would just have, for the next circle, it would just be people from Zibayag and people from REACH. And then the commissioners, not their staff, not their statement gatherers, not their friends that wanted to come and be part of this historic moment. And there were hurt feelings around that. And, you know, and they ended up gathering, and it just happened to be on the downstairs floor. It's not like we sent them to the basement, which is kind of, you know, the documentary filmmaking, that's how things get twisted. But it was really difficult. Because I, you know, you see the film and I'm not even in the circle. There was this huge table there, this huge round table, and everybody's around the table and I'm on outside of the circle, which is really, looking back, seems kind of significant sometimes. A lot of times I'm out of the circle. But it I can't tell you how difficult that moment was, and how I couldn't even, I asked Adam, the filmmaker, probably a couple years later, I said, can I see that video footage just before the film came out? I said, because I kept thinking I had flames coming out of my head and I was yelling at people. And when I look at the film, I wasn't, but inside I was really upset. And I see Nelson and Joyce, everybody's nodding their head. You can probably relate to those kind of moments, huh? But you know, that it really came to a head what we were doing and what we were there for, what each of us were there for. And I think, you know, for myself, I had to really make a decision, what was most important, and to elevate my people was my priority, and it still is. And it has helped to be able to keep voicing that more. You know, you get more courage, right, when you talk about it more. And I think it has helped us, you know, in REACH, in our work now, Wabanaki REACH going forward. We've changed our, you know, our R to restoration. We're really focused on restorative practices. We're really focused on truth, healing, and change. You know, feel, deal, and heal. There's no way around it. Like Nelson said, you can't get over the truth. You have to sit with it. You have to grieve if you're going to heal from it. And we have to stop people from erasing it and twisting it.
Yeah, I ask you that, and I want to turn to Dr. Christopher, because it seemed such a hard moment. You could tell that was hard, and even listening to you recount it now. So thank you for resharing that. That was a first rung of non-Native people who seemed to be allies, and they were even obstructing the process in a way that doesn't even begin to address the actual nefarious malefactors who are out there who want to subvert this. And we live in a moment where our president has denounced the 1619 Project at the New York Times, where any sort of racial bias, implicit bias conversations are now being outlawed from government agencies, where there's a 1776 executive order to not have people hate America, that somehow talking about any of this is unpatriotic. So Dr. Christopher, in this moment where we are as polarized as we were when at the time Nelson was talking about, how do we move this kind of process forward? How do we bring people along when this truth is so hard to tell for people, I don't know, it's hard to tell, as we've heard, and it's even more difficult for certain groups of people to hear.
First of all, let me honor Esther and the Nelsons and the many people around the country that have developed ways of doing this, ways of knowing, ways of being, that draw upon the strength of their history, of their culture, of their community, so that the traumatization of it is not the primary focus. So I just want to be clear that there are ways of doing this where people are supported. In terms of the moment that we have, you know, this moment is a direct reaction to the progress that's been made. This is a backlash to the idea of an African-American person occupying the highest office of this land for 8 years, for this country having the audacity to elect and support a world leader that stood against the fallacy of a hierarchy of human value. And so what we are experiencing right now is in many ways resistance, backlash. And if you've ever been in a combative situation, you know that the greatest resistance and the loudest noise comes closest to the moment of defeat. Now, people who know me know that I'm not ever one to use those types of metaphors, but on this morning, I am particularly reminded that this noise, this hullabaloo, this craziness, this attempt to erase the progress that we're making, it is just that. It is tremendous resistance. But you know, you have in politics, you know, you have the middle and you have opposite extremes. And our job in this work is to continue to expand the middle, so that in a democracy, we end up with the critical mass that is required for sustaining progress forward. In a democracy that's tied into voting, it's tied into politics, it's tied into campaigning, but ultimately we have to keep expanding the circles of engagement in a positive way. And I wish our media would grow up and stop becoming the amplifier of the voices of division, which are not really the dominant voices. I happen to believe that we're going to see that in November. I just wish we had a wiser mainstream and social media industry that understood they have a responsibility to our country to help play that role of helping to keep it united as a country. We've got some work to do to hold these new media entities responsible, whether it's a Facebook or a Google or anybody else or a Twitter. You know, they are being allowed to be completely irresponsible and to foment these extreme positions that are in fact minority positions. So I'm not, you know, I turned off my all media today. I'm listening to music because I refuse to let one person of the millions who have been diagnosed with COVID-19, I refuse to let one person be the dominant story in the media in my mind today when over 200,000 people have died, you know. So our job here is to create a narrative that is driven by love and belief in our humanity and in the humanity of others. And it is our responsibility to say that this is the dominant ethos. That nonsense, that extreme stuff, and executive orders get reversed. And when we have a new administration, that nonsense will be reversed. So that's where I am on that. I'm not even responding to it. It's just another manifestation of the lies, the many lies, the ultimate lie of a hierarchy of human value.
Hear, hear, well said. We have 2 questions so far from and please, people who want to ask questions, put them in the Q&A if you would. I'll start with 2 that have come in. They're related. There's someone listening who's looking for any of you know of a Truth Commission process or any sort of truth grassroots organization in New York City. and then someone else is looking for in Atlanta or North Georgia.
Huh.
And or what are resources, what would you recommend to someone who is looking to find allies and others to do this work with? And that anyone can take that up.
So Jill, I don't know of any commissions in either of those cities, but let me say this. Before we were able to impanel a citizen-led, by the way, we had no governmental support for what we did. In fact, we had governmental opposition and, Esther, no money. The foundation stopped funding us because they didn't understand what we were doing, and they were frightened by what we were doing initially. But there are many initiatives where people are getting together like we are now and speaking with one another. That is part of the process of building the truth, hearing each other and doing the research for ourselves. Before the Truth Commission was convened, the Beloved Community Center had several series of nights of 1,000 conversations.
Mm.
And we encourage folk to go to one another's homes, ideally across racial lines, across class lines, to engage the difficult questions of race. People in this country have been afraid until the recent times to just say the word and talk about race. Well, at Beloved Community Center, we've been talking about race for years. We are blessed to be multiracial. We are primarily Black-led, but we are multiracial, we're multi-generational, and discuss those difficult questions that relate to race, gender, religious differences, and all of that. So don't just think you've got to pop up and have a formal commission with named people and nameplates in front of them, what have you. Esther knows, built off of the fine tradition they have, and they built their process. So build off of whatever traditions that there are in your community, be that through churches, through community organizations or whatever, and it will flow. It will come to you collectively how to initiate such a process.
I will say that if you reach out to my organization after this, there is a network of campuses, and I know there's a strong effort in New Jersey, which is pretty close to New York. And I know that the government in Philadelphia has a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that they've set up. They're trying to get some work going on there. And there are other places. I know Buffalo, not New York City, but Buffalo, New York actually has a very vibrant effort. And I agree with you 100%, Joyce. You know, it's just a matter of connecting and talking and listening to people and moving forward on your own. Once you have the vision, I believe that the resources will be there to help you actualize your vision. So I think you should reach out to all of us. And certainly I know to us and to Nelson and Joyce, because they know people and they're connected and they can help. I think I volunteered you, but
There's a group in New Jersey of Native and non-Native people that are working together, specifically trying to get an offensive mascot changed in a high school, but they're also doing some other work. And I can't get my hands on the address right now, but if I have some time, I can try to find it and put it in the chat for you.
And we have a question. What was working with the press like around this? Were there special actions that you all have taken, that you took with the press to sensitize them to this, to have them understand what their role could be? That's a question from one of our listeners. This is in Maine or in Greensboro, or Dr. Christopher, in your experiences of this, what is the way to work with, if you're doing narrative change, what's the best way to work with the press?
I'll speak briefly. We started out by assessing what the press was doing around these issues. We had a major report produced that analyzed how the press was handling structural racism, institutional racism, and how they were in fact perpetuating bias and hierarchy. And we then engaged representatives from many, many aspects of the media, particularly media of color, we engaged them in our work so that they could begin to tell new stories and they could see more deeply. We also tried to support the emerging media talent so that we could have more people of color in positions within the media. I think it's very important, like everything else, it's about relationships. And if you have trusted relationships that are grounded in understanding, you're more likely to have appropriate stories being told.
Mm-hmm. I have I was not specific in asking someone's questions of before. So Dr. Christopher, do you know of projects in Atlanta or North Georgia that the Kellogg Foundation was involved in about truth and transformation?
You know, I don't know of, but you could go to the Kellogg website. There may have been some. I've been away 3 years from them. It's called Heal Our Communities is the location on the website to look for. There may be some there.
So thank you for that. I'm going to look one more time. I think we are running low on time. I want to take a moment to thank you all so much. This could have been double the length. I think we just scratched the surface. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you won't be in a position if we host another of these down the road to take up other aspects of this. I think it is such a fascinating topic, and as the Congresswoman's bill gains traction, we're all going to need to do this work together, and so that might be a way for us to reconvene and talk about how we all become local truth tellers and find other people who want to share the truth, and how we move that into a restoration, reconciliation, transformation process. Thank you again so much. This has been part of the programming of the National Center for Civil and Human Rights Campaign for Equal Dignity. We have some programs coming up that we're going to show on our screen that we hope you will be involved in. You can go to equaldignity.org to find out our calendar. You can watch all previous programs that we've done. This one included will be up on our website. If you want to share it with others, you can send them a link. I didn't get to it fast enough. The announcement came up and I missed it. I'm sorry. So you could go to equaldignity.org. There is a calendar of upcoming events for you to join. With that, I will sign off from this program. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Mutual.